that there's a cloud security certification that I've been studying for and getting ready to take for the past 5 years? Well, this past week I finally did take it, and in today's video I'm going to give you all of my study tips and recommendations on how to pass the CCSP. Hey everybody, what's good? What's going on? JB here, back, another CyberInsight video. And as I mentioned, I finally passed the ISC squared CCSP, their Cloud Certified Security Professional. It's something that I had on the bookshelf for a while. I actually think I started studying for it back in 2017. Just kind of got caught up with a few different things work-wise, and then started doing all this content creation, which ended up having me do, all these different types of study stuff for different types of certifications, and I kind of put this one, just on the back burner. It really was something that was a little bit more advanced. I didn't necessarily think there would be as much of an interest in it, and it was really something that was more something that interested me, that I wanted to go after. So I finally felt it was time to do it. New year, 2022. Kind of just started going through some of my old study material, bought some new study material. And after studying, I want to say probably about maybe 4 months, took it last week and actually passed it. So today we're going to talk about the different materials that I used. I'm going to give you a breakdown of the learning objectives that they have. This will be a video that will be useful to you and point you in the right direction if you're interested in getting this cloud security certification. All right, so we're just going to move over into the browser here, and I'm going to share some of my resources with you. So as you can see here, this is my ISC squared Pearson VUE exam history. I actually took the CCSP back in 2009. I think it was a paper test back then, so don't actually have that covered in here. But as far as computer tests for them, these are the two that I took. And somewhat similar in the way that they go about asking questions. We're gonna hit on that once we kind of dive into this. All right, so starting off, for those who don't know, the CCSP, is it the hardest cloud security certification out there? I don't know. I'm sure that there's some vendor-specific ones that are more challenging, but as far as vendor neutral and kind of more higher arching, I think that this kind of is considered one of the more advanced cloud security certifications that are out there. It might actually be one of the only ones that are out there, and that might be why it might take the crown for that. I think a lot of the other cloud certifications, especially more of the junior level ones, are just overarching about cloud, encompass a lot of different facts and topics, and security might be kind of weaved in there. But this one is actually specifically looking at how to build and secure cloud environments, kind of from the perspective of you being an architect and providing recommendations both to your IT staff, your CISO, your CEO, things along that line. So the exam itself has 6 different domains. If you're familiar with the CCSP, I believe they have 10 domains. So this is a little bit shorter, a little bit more condensed. But unlike the CCSP, which a lot of people say is a mile wide and an inch thick, this definitely goes a lot more into some in-depth information that someone who has expertise in these areas would definitely be expected to understand. So we're going to cover cloud concepts, architecture design, cloud data security, cloud platforms, infrastructure security, application security in the cloud, security compliance within the cloud, and then legal risk and compliance. And that is an underlying theme through most of those other domains, as far as, what can you legally do with certain types of information, especially when you have data in the cloud from individuals from different countries, or your data centers reside in different countries. So the exam itself is 3 hours, 125 questions, multiple choice, and you need to pass a 700 out of 1,000 points. So for me, I actually ended up taking about 2.5 hours, and that was for a few reasons, and mainly that was due to the fact that the questions themselves were very scenario based. So unlike the CCSP, which is a little bit more like you're just picking the right answer out of a simple question, A lot of the questions here in this exam are given this scenario and trying to protect or prevent these things or trying to gain these types of benefits, which of the following questions or which of the following answers would be most effective? And in order to really grasp and understand that, you're actually going to spend a decent amount of time reading the question. I would read the question initially, then look at the answers, and then go back and make sure that I was hitting on the keywords. Because in a lot of those scenario-based questions, there's normally a couple keywords that are going to help you narrow down, the answer from. They normally will have a couple answers that would be correct. One might be a little bit more generic than one that's going to be more specific. And in that case, you really want to go with the one that's more specific because that's going to be the better or more efficient answer for that type of question. So as we mentioned, the different domains, here's kind of the weight breakdown for all of these. Okay. So before we actually dive into this and the specifics of these different domains and the learning objectives there, just kind of off the top of my head, I would like to kind of just, hit on the things that I think definitely stick out as far as you making sure that you want to understand how these things work. It's not so much understanding a definition, it's more in depth than that. It's understanding what it is, the purpose of it, the risks involved with it, and how to protect certain types of components. And as I mentioned, you have a whole lot of different legal requirements and regulation requirements that kind of interlay with these different types of technology. So understanding how that all works together really is what's needed in order to answer a lot of these questions. So different types of technology you want to be familiar with: federation, single sign-on, key management, things dealing with cloud deployments and service models, right? So we're talking platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, database as a service. Understanding why you would use those in different cases. So why would you, as an architect, recommend that to your CISO or CEO as the type of model that you want to use? They hit a lot on making sure you understand the benefits of cloud technologies. So you definitely hit this, especially if you've taken any of the more junior level or entry level cloud certifications. They always hit on elasticity and self-service, redundancy, all those types of things. So if you've done that before, then you probably already have that area nailed down. But if you don't, you definitely want to make sure that you understand those things, not only for the benefits for those, but the risks that come with those. One of the other things that they hit on a lot is data and making sure that you understand interoperability, portability, the benefits and risks that come with multi-tenancy, how you secure a multi-tenant environment. A lot of that leads back to understanding the technological aspects of virtualization. You really want to make sure that you understand how you patch in a virtual environment, how you secure things in a virtual environment, the different types of operational risks that you have in a virtual environment, the different types of security risks that you have in a virtual environment. Since that's kind of like the underlying foundational technology in the cloud, it would make sense that it would be a learning objective that you want to make sure that you fully understand. Kind of get into a bunch of different standards: PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, NIST, and ISO stuff. Because of NDAs and not being able to talk too much about that, I can't actually say what type of questions I had, but understanding what those are and the different situations where those different types of regulations would come into play. As I mentioned, I would say this kind of like how in the CISP, the underlying thing that they talk about a lot is human safety, right? So are the decisions that you're making actually supporting the need to make sure that all of the individuals within the environment are safe? I would say within the CCSP, one of the things that you're looking at is the safety of data. And that really comes into play when you're talking about data centers in different countries and data from users in different countries. And that definitely is an underlying theme as far as understanding what rules you need to follow when dealing with those different types of data. Definitely going to hit on business continuity, disaster recovery, encryption, different types of encryption standards, why you would use different types of encryption, what's the benefit of encryption, what's the benefit of hashing, what you would use hashing for, and different ways that that could be used. Different types of cloud storage. You definitely want to understand the difference between object storage, volume storage. CDNs would definitely be another thing that you want to make sure that you understand. Database storage, and how those all map back to different types of cloud deployments. I'm trying to think some other things. Security tools is definitely another thing that you want to make sure that you understand. Again, not only what it is, but the purpose that you would implement it in a cloud environment. So things like DLP, and using that for data loss prevention, using it for determining different types of data in your environment, understanding IPS, IDSs, HIDs, NIDs, web application firewalls. What types of attacks can you prevent with those? DAMs, identity and access management systems is another thing that they hit on, that you want to make sure that you understand what those are and how you would use those. And again, that kind of ties back into some of the federation, single sign-on, hitting SAML, REST, SOAP, understanding the differences between those, the benefits for using each of those in scenarios where you would use those, how APIs come and play into the cloud environment. These are all things that you want to make sure that you're covering what they are, how to protect them, and what they're used for. So let's go ahead and actually dive into this. Since that was kind of just off the top of my head, I'm sure we're going to be hitting a few of these within here, but it'll just be reinforcing stuff. So cloud concepts, architecture, design, cloud computing concepts. So all the different types of definitions, roles and responsibilities. And again, that depends on the type of service that you're getting between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. And that comes into play specifically with if you're talking about a community cloud, a public cloud, a private cloud, right? There's different types of responsibilities that are shared or are unique to either the cloud provider or the cloud customer. Cloud computing characteristics, we talked about this. This was the stuff that I was mentioning. You want to make sure that you understand that a lot of the entry-level cloud certifications cover on-demand self-service, elasticity, multi-tenancy, measured service, all that different types of stuff. And then different types of technologies that go within the cloud, networking, storage, virtualization, all of that good stuff. Cloud reference architectures, so different types of capabilities that you have there. We kind of already talked about the different service categories, different deployment models, community, private, public, all that good stuff. Shared considerations. I already mentioned portability and interoperability. Vendor lock-in, vendor lockout, you want to make sure that you understand all of that stuff as well. Cryptography and key management. I mean, the one thing that you're going to definitely see, again, as you're studying through this, is you do not want to leave your keys within the cloud. You want to take those back, protect those yourself, because there's a whole bunch of bad things that can happen if your service provider ends up being compromised or you get locked out. Some bad stuff can happen. Identity and access control, data and media sanitization. Definitely want to understand the differences between what you could do there as far as overwriting, crypto shredding, actual destruction of devices, whether or not that actually is feasible or not in a cloud environment. Network security, virtualization security, security hygiene. You're definitely going to be wanting to understand the impacts of patching, why you want to patch certain ways, what the benefits are of baselining configurations, things like that. Design principles. So the cloud secure data lifecycle. This is actually one, there's a good mnemonic device for that, CSU SAD. So create, store, use, share, archive, and delete. I actually made a infographic for that. That was actually another thing that actually was pretty helpful with this. And I'll actually, we're going to be doing a blog post for all of this stuff as well. And I'm actually going to put all my infographics in there that I created. Business continuity, disaster recovery, business impact analysis, right? So it always comes back to it. You don't want to necessarily be recommending security solutions that end up costing more than the potential of whatever it is for a loss of data or the impact of the company, right? You want to be measuring that with a cost benefit analysis and return on investment to make sure that the protections that you're putting in place kind of align with the value of what it is that you're trying to protect. Kind of already hit on functional security stuff, security considerations for SaaS, PaaS, infrastructure as a service, all that stuff. DevOps, definitely want to understand that. Different ways to evaluate service providers. This is where you're going to be getting into some of the ISO stuff, common criteria, FIP stuff. Definitely want to understand what those are. Then cloud data security. We already talked about the data lifecycle, talked about storage types. Not only different types of storage, but then the threats that are unique to each of those. Looking at design and apply data security technologies, encryption and key management, hashing, data obfuscation. That's a big one. A difference between tokenizing data, masking data, anonymizing data. When does it make sense to do that? Is that something that you want to do with real data, real customer data? If you have instances of data that's being accessed by service desk or some type of people that are in customer care, maybe they shouldn't have all of the customer's data. Maybe some of that should be masked. So different types of scenarios that you want to make sure you understand where different types of data obfuscation comes in. DLP, why you would use that and where you would actually place that within your environment. And talking about key secrets and certification management. They cover a bit about data discovery and different types of data, the importance of classifying data, why you would classify data, what step in that data lifecycle would you classify data, design and implementation information rights management, plan to implement data retention, deletion, archive policies. How often are you backing up data? Where are you backing it up? How are you going to go about getting that data in the event that you need to get it? That also kind of plays into some of your business continuity and disaster recovery topics that you'll be hitting on as well. Let's see. Chain of custody, logging and storage analysis of data events. So let's see. Domain 3, cloud platform and infrastructure security. Again, a lot of these are overlap topics, but where they're just kind of looking at things from a different perspective or a different learning objective, where one might be looking at it from a functional perspective, and in this case, looking at it from a security perspective. Looking at how to design a secure data center, logical design, physical design. Are you building in the country? Are you building in the city? What risks come with both of those? How do you want to go about separating different tenants within the virtual environment? Environmental design, HVAC, stuff dealing with Uptime Institute as far as different certifications for level of redundancy and power and things like that. Hot air aisle, cold air aisle. I actually found that in having a solid background in engineering and implementing things in the data center, understanding virtualization, understanding how you actually deploy things in a data center actually is a pretty good knowledge base that there's a lot of overlap in the learning objectives that's covered in this exam. Risk assessments, cloud vulnerabilities, threats and attacks, and how to mitigate those. And kind of already talked about business continuity, disaster recovery, understanding the different types of recovery time objective, recovery point objective, single loss expectancy. Understanding what all of those are, understanding what the formulas are to determine what those are, understanding what the formulas are for those when you punch in the specific dollar values or impact to the organization. Creating and implementing a test plan for BCDR. That's a big one. Making sure that it's up to date all the time. Looking at the different types of testing that you can do, all the way from tabletop testing to full testing of the whole plan. What are the benefits and downsides of all of those different types of testing that you can do and the coordination that you need to have to be able to implement those types of testing plans? Cloud application security. OWASP Top 10 is definitely something that you're going to want to be familiar with. And you want to know about this not only from the perspective of, okay, I know what cross-site scripting is, but also what does that actually look like and what types of methods or tools or policies can you put in place to protect against the different types of vulnerabilities that are mentioned in the OWASP Top 10. The SDLC, software development lifecycle, definitely want to make sure that you know the different phases and methodologies of those. understanding the difference and kind of tying it back into DevOps, waterfall versus agile. What do you get out of both of those? From the perspective of constant development versus maybe a little bit better documentation and things like that. Cloud-specific risks, threat modeling. So Stride and Dread, two good things to know. I actually made infographics on both of those. Different types of functional and non-functional testing, black box testing, white box testing, static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, where you would use those, what is the output that you would have from those, using verified secure software, API, supply chain management, licensing, all that good stuff. Hit on ways to make sure that you're able to secure those different types of components that fall under that. So whether we're looking at web application firewalls, database activity monitoring, securing API gateways, things like that. How cryptography plays into that, identity and access management solutions and how to go about architecting those. So federation, identity providers, CASB, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, the different types of protocols that you would use for all of those, the different types of scenarios where you would use those in different types of cloud environments, things like that, are all things that you want to make sure that you are familiar with. Domain 5, build and implement physical and logical infrastructure. So here we're talking about hardware security modules and trusted platform modules, different types of hypervisors, type 1, type 2, how you go about operating and maintaining these different types of environments. So remote access into them, secure remote access into them, secure network configurations, how they go about doing that with VLANs, using encryption, DNSSEC, connecting a on-prem data center to a cloud environment via IPsec, VPNs, things like that. Network security controls, we kind of hit on a lot of these, IDS, IPS, things like that, firewalls. Using baselines to make sure that your devices are hardened, patch management, infrastructure as a code, again, going back to DevOps. Important to know the differences between all of these different types of operational controls and standards. So change management, incident management, problem management. What's the difference between an incident and a problem? If you've actually had any experience with IDLE, that goes over a lot of these different things that are kind of covered here. So that should be somewhat familiar to you if you have that type of background, especially if you've worked on the operational side of things. Digital forensics, collecting evidence, preserving it, managing communication with relevant parties, how you go about doing that, who's the best person to go about doing that, depending upon which stakeholders we're talking about. Then we look at managing a SOC, how all of the different intelligence comes into that, log capture and analysis, what we use a SIM for, what we use, all these other different types of tools for, incident management, vulnerability assessments. And then domain 6 is a legal risk and compliance. This is where a lot of the different guidances and documents end up coming into play here. A lot of the ISO stuff, GDPR, NIST, all of these different things, mostly related to protecting PII or personal identifiable information. Doing audits within environments, definitely want to make sure that you're familiar with the different types of SOC reports, what a gap analysis is, what you need to do for audit planning, understanding implications of moving to the cloud to the overall risk of your enterprise. Definitely want to make sure that you know what the difference is between the different types of people involved within data within the cloud. So data owner, controller, custodian, processor, and kind of who the different components within that flow would be, from the end user to the service that is collecting the data to the cloud provider who's hosting the data, understanding all of that. All right, so that kind of hits up all the different objectives. Now let's talk a little bit about the resources that I use. There's a few different things that I found very helpful. First off, this book bundle by Ben Malisow. I found this to be super helpful. You got the official study guide, and then you got the practice tests that come with that. Now the thing with the practice tests is I started using the book. I went through the book once, but really the most benefit is the fact that they have an online question bank of everything that's in that book. So what I did with this, my strategy for using this, and I found it to be pretty helpful, was went through all of the different domains, did all the questions. Anything that I was unsure of or got wrong, I marked and flagged. And so this will actually keep track of all the different questions you've either gotten incorrect or that you flagged. And you actually can just go back and take or make quizzes based off of those things that you had incorrect. The other thing that I would say that will definitely make using this to study really beneficial is they give a breakdown of why the answer is what it is and why the other answers isn't. So in a lot of cases where a question might be, which of the following isn't best for whatever, I would like to look at it also from the perspective of, okay, out of these things, which of these are good for this type of technology? And then also doing that same type of flipping that script a little bit when looking at the answers when I got them wrong to understand, not only why something was wrong, but why the other things were right and vice versa. Why I might have got a question right, but it's really good to understand why the other answers might be incorrect. So if you haven't taken any of the ISC squared exams before, they definitely do that a lot. They're very particular with kind of hitting on these keywords. So taking the time to actually figure out why an answer might be the best answer compared to multiple answers that are just good answers is really what's going to allow you to pass an exam like that. So they have questions for all the different domains, and then they have some practice exams as well. And as you can see, I did all right by the time I ended up getting through. I will say, don't expect these questions to be what you end up seeing on the test if that's what you think. You're going to be in for a world of pain. But I do think that these questions definitely do a good job as far as covering all of the different data. So if you're familiar with what these are covering, you're familiar with the learning objectives, and you have experience doing some of these things within an operational environment, then I think you're going to be pretty solid. I'll say for myself, I actually haven't worked implementing or architecting anything in the cloud, but all of my experience implementing and architecting things within a data center and using virtualization and being in areas that have an SDLC and are using idle-based practices definitely prepared me to be able to pass the exam. All right, so the last content study resource here that I think is really good is this CCSP. I don't even know what this is called, but it's we'll call it a study guide, I guess. It's free. It's out there. It covers a lot of stuff. I mean, it's pretty much as I was going through the tests, anything that I had any questions on that I needed to go back to, this was the first place that I went to. And so it breaks it all down, goes through all the different domains, has a lot of great information within here. The fact that somebody put this together and it's free, I think is fantastic. So I would definitely highly recommend this. I use this quite a bit. All right, so that wraps up all of the different learning objectives, kind of what I think, the areas that you should focus on, some resources that you can use, some paid, some free, but that should definitely get you on your way to being prepared to go and take this exam. Like I mentioned, it is a tough exam. It's not an easy exam. I found it to be very similar to the ISSAP, so that's the kind of architecture specialization for the CISP. I took that back in 2014. I found the questions to be very much similar, as they were much more scenario-based questions. There definitely were some questions where it was just like they ask a question and yeah, you pick the obvious answer. But I would say the majority of it was actually taking different types of data into account to end up coming up with what the best solution is, whether it's from an operational perspective or from a security perspective related to all these different types of cloud topics. So I'm going to put together a blog with this as well. I'll get that up on my website. Once that's done, I'll put it in the description down below. I'll put links for all of this stuff in the description down below as well. That way you can circle back later on, and if you want to see any of my infographics, you can go ahead and check those out as well. So yeah, leave me any questions you got. I'll try to hit them up. Hopefully I can be helpful with some of that. I'm going to be moving on to the AWS SysOps certification next. And I look forward to actually putting out some new AWS networking videos. I think that'll be kind of fun to do. And we're coming back. We're going to be doing some of the Cisco BGP stuff here this week, and probably do that for a few more weeks and continue doing some more CCNP stuff. So, all right. Hope everybody has a great afternoon, evening, day, whenever you're watching this. Go get at it, and we'll talk soon. All right.